This is a reading from the book of Exodus, from the 16th chapter. The Israelites set out from the place where they had been enslaved and walked into the wilderness. And as they went, they ate up all the food they had packed, and their tummies were empty, and their feet got blisters, and their backs started to hurt. They complained to Moses and Aaron, their leaders, "I wish we could go back. If only we had stayed in Egypt, where we sat by the pots of stew and had plenty of bread to eat. Now we're out here and we'll die of hunger. We didn't think it was going to take this long." Then God said to Moses, "I hear you all are hungry. I'm going to send food for you, but you need to listen to my directions. Every day you'll find the food, but you should only take as much as you need for that day. And if that sounds exhausting, don't worry. You can gather up enough on the 6th day to eat it on the 7th day, so you can take a day off." So Moses explained that to the people, saying that God was going to give them enough to eat on their journey. And they listened to Moses, and they were relieved, and their eyes were opened to the beauty of God where they were in the wilderness. And it did happen like God promised. In the evenings, quail came, so they could have meat to eat. And in the mornings, there was bread from heaven. The bread was strange, though. They didn't recognize it, so they said, "Manna," which means, "What is this stuff?" But it tasted good, and it was nourishing. Now, the people tested the limits that God had set out for them. When they tried to gather more than they needed for the day, it got rotten and stinky. Unless it was the 6th day, then it lasted for one extra. But they had what they needed for their long journey. And it was a very long journey. It lasted for 40 years. Good morning, church.
Morning, Kelly.
I can almost see you. I'm looking out at the pews, but I am imagining all of your faces there, which in fact is what I have been doing since I started in my role over a year ago, looking into some camera or some screen and imagining your faces at worship with me. And I hope you can see that I am so close, but not quite there, to preaching from the pulpit. I don't know if you remember last year, we recorded a few things in Advent from the sanctuary. We recorded a couple things in September. In fact, Molly and I were even live in September once, but we weren't in the pulpit because we said then, and I still say now, that the pulpit doesn't belong to me or to Molly, it belongs to you. It's your pulpit, and it's only really right for us to be in it when you are here in the room, when the preaching moment is happening with you here. So we're not quite in it this week, but we are so close. In fact, I can reach out and I can touch it. In the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't expect it to be this long. It almost feels impossible to remember what that was like. In the beginning of the pandemic, we really thought it would be a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe another month. We thought it would be short enough that we could sort of white knuckle it, that we could just pause everything. I don't know if your life was like my life, but in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of things were postponed. meetings and events that they said, we'll postpone until April 2020. We'll postpone until May. We'll be on the safe side and postpone until June. And it took us a few weeks, it took us really maybe a month to start figuring out that postponing was not going to work. That we couldn't just put things on hold. We couldn't put our lives on hold because we were going to have to live in the pandemic. We were going to have to live through it. We were going to have to find ways to be nourished, to get our lives accomplished, to meet each other, to work, to have fun, to exercise, to learn new things, to grow in the pandemic and not just wait until some magical day when it was over. And here we are, 20 months in. Our online church services are online only because, of course, we had online services before the pandemic, but our online only services are toddlers now. 20 months in, we're almost there to the moment when we transition, but I don't want to say transition back because it's not the same. We're not going back. We're going to a new thing. The thing that comes next isn't the thing we left. Some of us will be in the room here with me and with Molly next Sunday, but some of us will still be online. We will still be one church in many places. We will still be one church and many times. Some people will be worshiping live in the room, some live at home, and some later, worshiping in the future when our service already exists in the past. And we will still be one church across all of those different barriers, all those different axes of difference. We have been practicing being church across different kinds of differences for many years. This is just one more. We're almost there. Almost there to the next thing, but not almost there to the thing we left. People will be in the room, but they'll be masked, they'll be distanced. We will still be changed. We will still be different. I think the Israelites in this morning's reading were wrestling with some of the same energy. They had left their enslavement. They were on a journey to something new that they didn't know what it was going to be like yet. And they started off pretty chipper. They started off feeling like, okay, we packed our bags. We'll just walk there, and then we'll settle into whatever comes next. And then they started walking, and they ate all their snacks, and their feet started hurting, and their backs started hurting. And they started thinking, I didn't sign up for this, and I thought it was going to be shorter and easier than this. That's how I felt at the beginning of the pandemic. I sure thought it was going to be shorter and easier. And they complained to Moses, and they said, I wish we could go back to where we cooked feasts for other people and had crumbs for ourselves. I wish we could go back because we knew what that was like. We knew how to do that. We don't know how to do this. And Moses, of course, dutifully takes the complaints to God. And God does not say, oh, I hear that you'd like to be done. I hear that you're finished with your journey and you'd like to be completed. God says, I hear that you're hungry. I hear that you're hungry. I hear that you ate all your snacks. I will help you. I will give you food to eat, even though it might not be what you're used to. In fact, I'll give you better food than you had before. The scripture describes the way their complaint was. They said, we sat by the flesh pots and ate bread. We cooked meat for other people, but we didn't have it for ourselves. On this journey, God says, I will give you quail every day and bread, even though you might not recognize it. And the journey was long, longer than they expected, longer than they wanted, but there was nourishment for them along the way. They didn't even necessarily know where they were going. It probably shouldn't have taken them 40 years to walk from Egypt across the Jordan River. They probably weren't going in a straight line. And the pandemic has felt like that too. Like sometimes we're going in circles, like we get the numbers come down and we're doing really well, and then the pandemic sort of comes back and crests again, and our vaccines make us feel like everything is safe, and then we look at the numbers and they say, oh no, the efficacy is going down and you're not, but now the numbers are better. It's hard to plan. It's hard to figure out what to do. It feels like walking in circles. But I think that's part of the point. My partner Cheryl and I took up backpacking during the pandemic. We're beginners. Now, I know some people do very long hikes backpacking. In fact, some people in our congregation do, where you start at one place and you walk and you end up at another place. Cheryl and I hike for a couple of days, maybe 3, and we almost always end up right back where we started, because that's where the car is. We park the car and we strap on a bunch of stuff, and then we walk back to the car. And if we were looking for efficiency, this wouldn't be it. If we were looking for efficiency, we could just leave the backpack. We could just stay in the car. We could not even bother driving to the trailhead. But the point of it isn't the efficiency. The point of it isn't where you end up precisely. The point of it is to walk. The point of it is to move and to look around and to be present to what's happening and to get back changed in big ways and in small. Changed by our encounter with wide vistas and wild places and animals and wind and sun and rain. Changed by our encounter with places that are on a different time frame, places that are worried about different things than we are worried about. The journey is the point. And there is nourishment along the way. For physical nourishment, mostly things that we carry in our own packs on those trips. But for spiritual nourishment, it's fresh in every moment. And I think the pandemic is a little bit like that. And in fact, I think everything that's worth doing, every big project that we're engaged with, is like that. It's too long and too big to white knuckle it, to just hold our breath and push forward and grind until we get to some destination. For most of our justice issues, most of our family stuff, most of our projects of growth in our own lives, degrees that we're working on earning, people we're parenting or caring for or accompanying, we have to be in it for the long haul. Because it's too big to do all at once. It's too big to hold in our minds and our hearts the whole project at once. We have to live in it while it's happening. Luckily, we have these promises from God that there will be nourishment even if it looks strange to us, that there will be enough of it, that there will be rest, that we don't have to grind every single day, but that we can take a day off, that we can trust that other people are there to pick up the slack, that what we've done on day 6 will sustain us on day 7, and that the journey is not forever, even though it is long. The next thing is about to come for us, but we are still on the journey of long haul church. Even when we transition from here to here into the pulpit, even when you transition from your screen to the room, whether that's next week or sometime in the future, every transition is part of this long journey. And the journey is church. The journey is the point. The journey is the place where God is with us. And we have these promises. So our invitation in this season of transition, where we're figuring out what's going to come next and how things are going to feel and how it's going to work, is to enter into it with curiosity. When something strange comes along, to say, Mana, what is this? To not say, that's not for me, I don't like it, before we try it. To take in the nourishment that comes to us, to set things down when it's time to rest, and to look for God, who goes before us and behind us to keep us together as a community and to lead us on into what's coming next. Let's stay in it for the long haul, church.